Congress has voted to release the entirety of the Epstein files. Just how bad could this be for the president? And why is the fallout already starting to hit some of the biggest players on both sides of the aisle? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Plus, we're going to talk about the actual driving force behind the release of these files. Okay, so Congress has voted decisively, in fact, to send the Epstein files release bill straight to President Trump. In fact, the House of Representatives approved it, a 427-1 vote, one of the most lopsided votes we've seen in pretty much this presidency, for sure. Very rarely do you see a total decisive move like this. But what's most heartening is, again, hearing the statements from the victims of Epstein's trafficking organization saying that for years they said that they felt they had been betrayed by key institutions that are meant to protect Americans. And again, a lot of these victims were Americans. And this is part of a troubling trend, not just of concealment, but particularly concealment by the White House. And one of the things that's fascinating is that even the White House has realized they can't really hold back the tide on this one. They've resorted to pure cope. In fact, Senate Majority Leader John Thune told CNN that he expected the Senate to receive a bill from the House of Representatives and that the bill would be passed and sent right to Trump for signature. Now, what's fascinating is that these majorities are veto-proof, meaning that Trump couldn't veto this legislation if he wanted. But the hilarious part about this is that the DOJ can release any files they want. Well, not quite, but they can release almost any files that they want as long as they comply with certain privacy regulations. Look no further than every couple of years, there's a tranche of documents released by the White House regarding usually a controversial historic event, like the JFK assassination and the Church Commission, or the Abu Ghraib scandal, right? These are historic events that the White House, without any legislative pressure, chooses to simply say, hey, in the interest of transparency, let's show this to the American people of our own accord. So the fact that this took a legislative act at all is a sign of just how hard the White House has tried to suppress this information, or control it, might be a better way to put it. Now, what's totally wild is Trump. He's given up trying to stop the files from going out, and he says, I just don't want Republicans to take their eyes off the victories that we've had, he wrote in a social media post. Now, again, it's literally like, don't look down, okay? Or don't look up. He's saying literally, just don't look too hard at these Epstein files, guys. Just focus on the cost of groceries, which are actually still up, or his law enforcement, which is also increasingly unpopular. So, of course, Trump said there was nothing to hide in the files, but also said that the files were a Democrat hoax. The only person who didn't vote to release the files was Clay Higgins of Louisiana, citing his concern about innocent people being hurt. And this is fascinating because this was one of the copes that a lot of people expected to get sort of massaged into this Transparency Act bill, which is to say that, oh, well, we should redact the names of innocent bystanders, essentially people who communicated with Epstein, but where there's no credible allegation that they've done anything wrong. Now, bear in mind, the victims were often young teenagers. So do you think that a young teenager is going to be able to remember decisively if she was assaulted by a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or a chair of a White House Economic Council, right? Of course not. This is ridiculous to think that. A lot of times the victims weren't even native English speakers. So the notion that they're going to be able to, that waiting for them to make credible accusations before you release a name is a farce, right? There's almost no one that they'd be able to recognize. But more troubling is the fact that, the White House, again, has been really fighting tirelessly to dodge this. And it's cost them immensely. Now, what's fascinating is that here's the official stance from the White House spokesman, Abigail Jackson, which is interesting because, again, usually this is the role of Caroline Leavitt. but she has been unusually silent about this. Again, your speculation is as good as mine as to why, but Jackson has said, quote, President Trump has never been against releasing the Epstein files. Categorically untrue. This is just a lie. Rather, he's always been against Republicans falling into the Democrat trap of talking about the Epstein files rather than focusing on the historic tax cuts, the 0 illegal aliens that have entered the country in 5 months, also not true, and many other accomplishments of the Trump administration on behalf of the American people. Very weird and stupid. Again, Trump could just release things at any time he wants. He's fought tirelessly to avoid doing it. And again, I think what he's doing is releasing it now because he realizes that if it gets released any time later, that his opposition, he's going to have less time to fix things, right? Because the American public has a very short-term memory. And he's probably saying, listen, we need to make sure we have a chance to mitigate this before the midterms. And more importantly, I think a lot of members of Congress are saying, listen, I don't want to be, my opponent is going to campaign against me as, Congressman Billy Williams, pedophile protector. And boy, that is a really hard slogan to campaign against, regardless of whether you're, a farmer in Iowa or a, cleaner in the big city or a hedge fund manager in New York. You generally don't really care much for people who sexually assault children. It's probably one of the few ideals that still binds us as Americans. So, President Trump's probably his best path now is just to get these things out there and try to aim for, quote, messaging and management, trying to call it a hoax, right? Call it nonsense. And he's pretty good at this, actually. He managed to somehow reframe his January 6th effort to literally subvert the free and fair elections of the United States, not just like a symbol of democracy, but literally the thing that makes America a democracy. He somehow tried to reframe that as a Democrat hoax. He reframed his sprawling connections with the Russian Federation and Putin government as some kind of also Democrat hoax. So again, and he's already trying to reframe the Epstein thing as a Democrat hoax. Now, the funny part is that despite being an obvious Democrat hoax, according to Trump, it was a hoax concocted by Democrats, and the Democrats just put their own names into the files. Truly one of the great hoaxes of all time, because you might note that Larry Summers, who literally has so many insane contacts with Epstein that it's got to be its own video. It's going to be its own video. But he's resigning from the board of OpenAI, been booted out from Harvard. Now, here's the funny thing, right, for all these communications. But the insane part is that it's not a secret. Larry Summers was on those flight logs. He was all over them all the time. So this notion that Larry is out here, like suddenly we now learn that Larry Summers was friends with Epstein is insane. And the answer is, of course, that the board at Harvard, OpenAI, they knew these things. They just didn't care. The only reason they care is because the American public started to care. And that is the fundamental truth of this, is that you don't understand how badly the elites of the world are beholden to the American public, right? Because if you, the public, if you, the viewers, care about this, and by the way, you should like the video and comment and subscribe and even share it if you think it's relevant. You can also help me out by becoming a member either on combatvetnews.com or just that big old membership button there. You get access to uncensored combat footage. It drops twice a week, including stuff that literally isn't available publicly yet. So you can do that to help me out. But the thing is, if the public watches Epstein news updates like this video, then you've incentivized not just me, but every other creator to talk more about it, to dig deeper into the files, to demand action. Just like if people care about it, if it rises in the ranks of things they care about, that they want their elected representatives to care about, those representatives, as we're seeing now, they can either take action on Epstein or their opponents are going to hammer them to death in the elections with it. So as the American public cares about this, about actually holding powerful people to account for the things they've done, you're seeing the government, the wheels of government turn in its favor. And look, Trump's approval rating is down to just 38%, near his all-time lows as a president. Strangely enough, still above that of Joe Biden, which is kind of wild in its own right. But again, Joe Biden could have also released the Epstein files, and he didn't. So this is right. Just 26% of Americans say that Trump is doing a good job of managing cost of living. Again, 75% of Americans still think things are too expensive. Inflation is still remained high by historic standards, though it's not the 9% we saw in the post-COVID era. But only 20% of Americans and just 44% of Republicans approve of how Trump is handling the Epstein case. 70% of poll respondents say they believe the government is hiding information about Epstein's clients. This is an insanely bad outcome for the administration, right? Because remember, we saw this directly translated into a horrific showing in the midterms, and the Republicans are likely panicking because, as you might recall, Trump looked at the 2024 electoral data, in which he had a decisive victory primarily because he lied to the American people about his intentions and his policies. But he took that unusually popular, unusually one-sided election and said, listen, we can redraw our congressional districts so that we get more seats as long as voters don't change their minds. So they redrew a bunch of maps, and now, lo and behold, it sounds like voters are already sick of what Trump is selling. So Republicans are probably in full panic mode. And the only way they're going to have an electoral chance, given that they're anchored to this absolute dead horse, is basically going to be to pin everything on him. And in fact, the best thing that could ever happen for the average congressional Republican right now would be Trump dying, because then they can release everything. They can pin it all on a dead guy, and they could say, well, now you're just running. I'm just running myself. I'm not running on behalf of Trump's policies. Right. And so in a lot of ways, the administration deserves whatever happens to them, not just because of the trafficking kids. But also worth noting that General Pam Bondi, right? Remember, this didn't require a congressional act. Pam Bondi just dropped some Epstein files. A lot of people said, hey, these are all publicly available information anyway. But she literally called it phase 1, right? They literally said this is phase 1, right? The first phase of the files released today, and that is February 27th. So what happened to phases 2 and 3, right? The answer is, of course, it was we're seeing that Trump is just not that smart a guy. When he truly gets to make the decisions, he's not that sophisticated. Like, you called it phase 1 and you didn't ever want phase 2 to go out. Like, you're just asking for it, man. You're just asking for it. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thanks so much. Thanks, Sergey Zinchenko, Thomas Anderson, William Angus, Jankov Georgiev, AL90, all of our lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you guys. Appreciate y'all so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.